natural voice. Oh, I always forget to do that myself. You'll hear my natural voice slightly before you hear my amplified voice. So if you find this disorienting, feel free to move farther back now or at any time during the presentation. I'm advocating to get this fixed. Now, some acknowledgements and thank yous. The Random Review Committee is a group of 9 volunteers who come together once a year to select the books and reviewers for this 10-month series. It's a great deal of work. This program is co-sponsored by the Friends and Foundation organization. They founded Random Review as the Friends, and for 30 years they ran it single-handedly. They also provide support for the library in many ways, the most visible of which are their book sales. You can learn more about how to join or volunteer from the Support Your Library button on our homepage. To see the schedule of upcoming Random Review events, grab a bookmark from the back of the room, or visit the Random Review webpage from the library homepage by way of the Random Review button. On that page, you'll also find a list of related books compiled by volunteer Gail Gerdeman, some of which are on the counter in the back of the room today. And those you can they're not checked out, but they're free to take. You can also find links to video recordings of each event. All Random Review events are streamed live, so you also have the option to view them from home as they happen. Now then, today's selection is Crossings by Ben Goldfarb. I will now pass the microphone to Connie Giorgio to introduce our speaker.
I don't know, nobody has ever in the history of the world found it difficult to hear me. Do I need to use this? Oh, okay.
You can do it.
Yes, use this?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I see what you mean. I hear me twice. Okay. Here is Dr. Katie Moriarty. She's a forest wildlife ecologist. Oh, she's a forest wildlife ecologist. Oh, boy. And president of the Oregon chapter of the International Wildlife Society. She's a senior research scientist at the international nonprofit Ecology. I keep seeing those initials, and now I know what they stand for. The National Council for Air and Stream Improvement. At Ecology, she's a lead research scientist for the forestry group, and her research interests are in sustainable forestry, and she and her research team work on projects like assessing how sensitive species use managed forest landscapes and evaluating biodiversity responses to a variety of factors like large wildfires. Her territory for Ecology is very large, the western United States, Oregon, California, Washington, and Montana. And she trains people who do actual field work on the ground, not to say that she does not also, on native bees, red tree voles, which I'm hoping there's a picture of because I don't know what they look like, bats, martins, fishers, lynx, and grizzlies. She's affiliated with 4 universities and co-mentors 10 graduate students and several field teams. She's very busy. She's rarely home. She's my neighbor, so I know. In addition to the International Wildlife Society, she's active in the International Marty's Working Group and the International Union for the Conservation of Nature in the Small Carnivore Group. She provides scientific evidence for tools and opportunities for land managers. For example, she recommends plant species that can be planted in burn piles after wildfires that promote bee diversity and native plant species. So please welcome Katie Moriarty.
I got one. Thanks, Connie. Thank you and welcome to this random review. As you know, today we'll be talking about road ecology. But challengingly, Ben Goldfarb has won lots of awards. This book is actually quite good. I'm a scientist, and normally scientific books are quite dull and repetitive and also inaccurate. But that is not the case for this book. So I would highly recommend it, as would all of these other people. My main challenge is that Ben Goldfarb does a great job talking about his own book. So if you really like to learn about crossings, you should listen to him and not me. Instead today, I'm going to integrate my favorite parts of the book, but also integrate a lot of things about Corvallis and Oregon that are not in the book. So if you were interested about the parts of Corvallis and Oregon, they're not in the book. But they will be in this recording that you could come back to later. I asked AI to do an image of this book for me, and I gave it a lot of keywords, and it created a monstrosity of curiosity. I would not use this as a pathway to figure out this book, but I thought it was entertaining, especially since there was a lot of garble. My first introduction was about 10 years ago. I was the consultant for carnivores on the Snoqualmie Wildlife Restoration Projects in Washington. So this is the biggest global wildlife crossing initiative. There's 27 huge crossings where they're trying to get salamanders, newts, pikas, martens, grizzlies, lynx, wolverine, all across this major shipping route. And for the most part, most of these overpasses are done. It's really fun to go look while you drive through, like the Gold Creek underpass that you see here is really excellent. I wouldn't recommend stopping on the highway, that's frowned upon, but there are places to safely pull out. And so this particular marten that I was able to collar not far from this crossing never crossed. And that is unsurprising, but someday it might. As Connie mentioned, I work with a team of international scientists, mostly focused on forestry. We are a group that mentors a lot of early career professionals. So this little thing here, Connie, is a red treble. It's just a little guy, about 20 grams. I think that's my only picture. So we work with small mammals, and as Connie mentioned, I've been doing a lot of work lately with native bees. My fame, if I have fame, there's no ecologist that's ever famous. You go on the streets of New York, no one would ever hear of anyone, including E.O. Wilson. But the 100 people that care about these weasels would know me, the marten species. So I'll throw in a little pitch about them later. And generally, I work with a wide range of wildlife and species, most of which are in forested environments. As most of you, I think about roads every day. In fact, Corvallis has a lot of roads, and this is a traffic map. Ben Goldfarb mentions that anything that has over 10,000 cars per day is probably a barrier to wildlife. So everything on this map that you see in colors greater than yellow have greater than 10,000 cars per day. So that includes, of course, 3rd Avenue, Highway 34, Highway 5, etc. So these are most likely barriers for wildlife, and the Willamette Valley is full of them. And you could look at transportation flow maps if you're really curious. I also design wildlife studies. This is a map of the Oregon Coast Range. And I have found out recently, trying to account for roads, there is nowhere in the Oregon Coast Range that's more than 500 meters from a road. And definitely nothing more than a kilometer, even the wilderness areas. Not all the roads are in use. Some of them are gated, some of them are dirt. But there is not a single place in the Coast Range, including Cummin Creek Wilderness, Rock Creek Wilderness, that is more than a kilometer from a road at all. So today I'm going to talk about a lot of different things with crossings. It might feel a little bit active, but then you could go watch this again if you were entertained. And what I'd like to do is have these series of 5 little vignettes. So we're going to talk about a little bit of history, just a little, and then we'll talk about amphibians, birds, mammals, and insects. because that's my comfort zone. Ben Goldfarb did a great job also talking about how roads is fragmented communities. And I'm not going to talk about that aspect because social interactions make me awkward. So let's start off with thinking about roads. We started building roads quite early. The US Army, as mentioned, built a lot of roads between 1807 and 1880. But notice these cars. These cars were, once upon a time, known as the Devil Wagon. And this is a video from the 1924 Sherlock Jr., which was just shown at the Majestic. Super excellent. And this is an action of what's called flivverboobery. This is a slang term from the 1920s that Corvallis needs to bring back. Flivverboobery. A flivverboob is someone who drives erratically. This is flivverboobery. And you can notice this all around Monroe. But one of the funny things, or one of the kind of curious things, is that during this time, in 1924 in particular, 23,000 people were killed, mostly children, because people did not pay attention to drivers. These are not horses, right? These are much different, and they also have now invented lots of safety features. So not only have people had a lot of issues with roads, as have wildlife. So now we're going back into my comfort zone. The worst, of course, are amphibians and reptiles. These animals need heat to survive, so they're attracted to warm pavement. And also when it's nice and wet and shiny, they believe the road to be a stream. So you'll have amphibians that'll lay their eggs on wet roads, thinking that that'll work out for them. It's called an ecological trap. This book does a great job talking about some of the trauma to turtles, in this case in Georgia. It's a great case study where thousands and thousands of turtles were killed. And it's a nice evolution of a story of one individual that was able to create underpasses for a certain group of turtles. There are, I think, 6 species of turtles in this area of Georgia. So that's something that I haven't thought much about. Goldfarb does a great job moving us to different parts of the world. So we focus on some of the cold-blooded reptiles and amphibians of Costa Rica, which is really diverse. So that's a fun journey that we could all take. But he also features Portland, actually, in his book. And this is an article from High Country News that I just highlighted from this year, February 2026. So you could read not only about it in the Goldfarb 2023 book Crossings, but also the evolution now. So this is a group about the Frog Brigade. For 13 years with their buckets, they would go out and they would catch these red-legged frogs and ferry them across the highway. And then they'd wait for them to breed and they'd ferry them back every year. And now they have glowing reflective jackets that say frogs. But for the most part, what you'll notice about road ecology is it's a small group of passionate people that through collective voices can get things done. So this is an example of just 2024, the first amphibian crossing in Oregon, which helps having highlights from books like Crossings and others. In Corvallis, the thing you all have to work out or look out for are rough-skinned newts. These are all pictures from Corvallis. They are everywhere, and they are especially on Bald Hill and the bike trails. So you might have seen these newt crossings as you're out and about on a nice walk. And in the spring months, when it's rainy and it's warm and they come out of their little hibernation, they will go out en masse, especially if you're on the Lewisburg Trail, and they get run over all the time by bicyclists. So if you are a good fan of bicycles or vehicles, just keep an eye out for newts. They have a little eye shine that you can tell if you have your lights on. Switching to birds. Well, actually, are there any questions about amphibians or reptiles? That's all I was going to tell you about them. Yeah, go.
Are newts poisonous to touch?
Newts are toxic. You don't want to touch them and lick them. I would say no licking of the newts. I would wash your hands before you eat food because sometimes you forget and then lick your fingers on accident. But for the most part, no, they won't hurt you at all. Similarly, all of our snakes are venomous, but we don't really have venomous snakes except for rattlesnakes in Oregon. So I'll do one more question, then we're moving on.
What kind of underpass would the newts use in the Walkhill area?
Oh, that's a great question. Underpasses that oh yes, I will. Amphibians are often associated with water, so underpasses that things like newts, frogs, turtles, and others would use would include anything that would maintain moisture when they are moving. So a culvert could work, especially a culvert with, say, understory vegetation or rocks. But for the most part, they do bridges that look, I'll show you another underpass later. Great. So birds are a fascinating group of species. This is a great gray owl from Klamath, Klamath area. And the book starts with talking about swallows, specifically cliff swallows, and this particular paper that's showing that they're shortening their wings and changing their morphology to avoid cars as they fly around under underpasses. So again, we started making roads in the early 1800s. We're having a profound effect on most species. Some can adapt, some like amphibians probably cannot. We don't think often in Corvallis about ice. We don't, hopefully, but we do put salt on the roads on occasion here and almost everywhere else in the United States. Salt is really a nutrient that is missing in a lot of our animals' areas, so they need that nutrition. So they'll eat things off the road in your cars. And now we have this challenge of runoff going into creeks, streams, and bodies of water. So salinity is rising in a lot of places. Just think about that. One of the chapters in Crossings is about the blab of the pave. So that's the title. And he highlights national parks. I don't know how many of you have been to Crater Lake in the past few years? In the summer? Yeah, maybe. It's really busy now. It's phenomenally. So Crater Lake last year had about 600,000 visitors. And in 2025, our national parks had a little bit over 3 million visitors. So roads can be really loud. Goldfarb highlights Denali as a national park that does not allow cars. They only have a shuttle. So if you want to find areas with wilderness, some areas are designated wilderness but are not necessarily quiet. This has a profound effect on many of our birds. So birds, especially this time of year, are migrating and or trying to establish territories. And one of the case studies that Goldfarb highlights is the Phantom Road, or this place where they made fake noise in the woods. And when they make fake noise, imagine a whole road of sound meters that make lots of racket. Those birds got louder, and they had to compete with the roads. So if communication is your way of breeding, you have to be louder than the ambient. And I added this case study of COVID, where in San Francisco, when we were all restricted, birds actually quieted down. So they were able to sing more normally. Another case study and chapter is roadkill. And I talk about roadkill in this case because in the east, Eastern Oregon, we have a lot of sage grouse. It's an endangered species, or no, it's a threatened species that has been petitioned to be endangered many times since 1912. People have been trying to alert society to the perils of sage grouse. And Oregon State Professor John Dinkins has mentored many graduate students in the last decade or more, focused on roadkill, ravens, and sage grouse chicks. So the more roadkill there is, the more food that's available, the more ravens there are, and the fewer sage grouse chicks and eggs on the landscape. This is also highly problematic with another actual endangered species, the marbled murrelet in the Coast Range, and ravens and other predators eat murrelet babies and eggs. So the more trash you leave out at a campground, or the more animals that we kill on the road, the more corvids and other animals that are eating these particular things and also just creating chaos. So the effect of road expands far beyond the road itself. There are some good things that we've done with roads. And in the United States, we have what's called the Breeding Bird Survey. And that started in 1966. So here are all the routes of North America that have been going on for much time. Here are some of the routes near, or in Oregon, and here are the 5 routes near Corvallis. So these routes are 24.5 miles, where you go out next month. You could all become volunteers with a little bit of training and listen for birds with your very best bird friends. And then every half mile, you collect data on the various birds, and then we could look at increases and declines of various species. I'm going to go on to mammals, and I'll take more questions at the end, because mammals, I have a longer section. Mammals are what typically I think about when I think about road ecology. It really is not great to hit a pronghorn or a deer. But some of the things that Goldfarb highlights, I was not as aware of as I should be. For instance, he has a chapter called Hotel California about the crossings in Southern California with these animals that got past the highway somehow, but then could never leave, just like the eagle song. And this created some, not only concern, but community activism, where a group of people highlighted this one mountain lion called Puma 22 and created a whole festival that's been going on for over 10 years, raising $87 million to create an overpass. Ground roots, that means we can do it Corvallis. If we need an overpass, we can make a festival. We're good at this. But it was a very good case study, and it showed a lot of community involvement, which I thought was great. One of the things I like about this book is it keeps taking us to different parts of the world. So in the chapter called The Tsunami, we start to learn about roads in Brazil. And I bet you weren't thinking about giant anteaters until now, but now you are. So your species of the day is the giant anteater. Your word of the day, again, is flivverboobery. And now you'll be able to remember that there are some very, very strange mammals of the world that are very ill-adapted to roads and speedy cars. I don't want to talk about this too much, but it was fun to listen to Goldfarb, who traveled to Brazil to learn about these particular scientists and their work studying giant anteaters. There are other places in our tropical America where we have road crossings that are both canopy and underground. So that could be something that we could learn from. We do have some canopy species, and we have a lot of complications, one being tree voles. This won't work, but it's cool to think about anyway. And he also highlights other projects of the world. So he took us to the UK, where he describes Project Splatter, which they renamed the Road Lab. Project Splatter is much better. And in the chapter about sentinel roads, he describes opportunities that we could learn from various roadkill. So in this particular project, citizen scientists collected data on all the species everywhere in the UK, and they found that there is different timing of roadkill for every species, as an example. He also highlights in the UK, same university, the Otter Project, where every roadkill otter has been advertised, collected, and used for science. And this is a 2025 paper I found that looked at the genetic differences of otters in the country. This would be a huge data set for somebody in the United States to learn about these rare and endangered animals that we have trouble collecting information on. One of the biggest challenges of all time are deer. And from the historical perspective, Goldfarb outlines that deer actually weren't a problem before suburbia. So our suburban environments have really raised deer. How many people have seen a deer in their yard? Okay, those are real easy to hit. They're very tame, these deer and turkeys and peacocks, depending on where you live in Corvallis. But this is a real challenge with lots of injuries annually, millions and millions of damage to cars and people. And this estimate of 10 billion in property damage was just for last year. Oh. Yeah, so here's a map of the vehicle collisions in Oregon. So anything that's here has more than one collision per mile per year. I'll say that one more time. Everything on this map is one or more collisions per mile per year. And between 2021 and 2025, based on the Oregon Transit data, there were 25,969 wildlife vehicle collisions. And that's only for the ones that are reported. Do you guys report when you hit a gray squirrel attacking your tires? No, you don't. So you know this number is more than 25,000. You only report it if you need an insurance claim, for the most part. So one of the things that I thought was interesting is Corvallis, of course, has a lot of vehicle collisions that were reported. And just south of Lebanon, it's more than 7 per mile per year. And if we look at Myrtle Point, this area has a lot of elk in our coast range, more than 7 per mile per year. So, yeah, feel really safe driving home. Don't contribute to this. But Oregon is taking note of some of these incidents. So our first overpass in the state, an underpass, was called the Lava Butte. There's multiple crossings along Highway 97. You probably have gone by these or seen fencing, and you're like, why are they fencing the road? They're fencing the road to push the deer towards an underpass. Yep. And at the southern end of our state, along I-5, in 2028, they're going to build a $37 million overpass is planned. It would be our biggest overpass of the state, and it would be really good for helping connect the forests on either side of I-5. So that's exciting. Keep your eyes out. Watch out for traffic. During an interview with Science Friday, which I would recommend listening to right after the book came up, Ben Goldfarb told the world that his biggest concern was with carnivores. So carnivores and roads, carnivores typically have lower reproductive output, often lower survival. Often these animals are a little bit more aggressive. Maybe they'll ignore cars entirely. And so I wanted to bring you on a brief journey about some of our research on martens, because I'm going to plug martens everywhere I go. A marten is a member of the weasel family, just like your wolverine, honey badgers, ferrets, except for they're about the size of a gray squirrel. Martens are considered a habitat specialist, so they only den in tree and snag cavities, and they move around their home range quite often. We wrote a paper in 2018 that it looks like they move around the entire circumference of their home range every 4.6 days. So for us, that'd be doing somewhere between 20 and 50 miles every day with our body weight. They have what's called delay in reproduction till they're 2 years, and they have delayed implantation. Really hard to have more than 2 kids. Typically, martens are at the highest latitudes in snow-covered environments, but we have a very special marten subspecies on the coast. We thought it was extinct, but it's not. So in Northern California and Southern Oregon, all the way past Florence and maybe to Newport, keep your eyes out, there is a thing called the coastal marten. It's a subspecies of Pacific marten, Martes carina. And in 2014, when my team came on the scene, we only had 26 locations and 14 were roadkill. That's all we knew about this potentially extinct subspecies. And as it turns out, there is speculation that because of these roadkills, We thought of all the coastal martins in Washington, Oregon, and California, Oregon was the best. That was the speculation. So no one cared about martins in Oregon. I work with a great many people. This is a handful of them. And my team is pretty elaborate. As Connie mentioned, I'm helping co-advise people at 5 different universities, lots of grad students, lots of field teams. And we searched for these martins, and it didn't work out at all. This is most of my life. I look for rare and endangered species, and I don't find them. But we get pictures using remotely triggered cameras that most people use for hunting. These take a picture if there's movement or heat. And then we learned how to crawl. And we bought knee pads, just like most of you all have for gardening. This worked out really well. So we were able to find martins, and we enlisted the help of what's called detection dog teams, who are trained specially to look for scat using their wonderful noses. So we found many a martin. With the help of so many collaborators throughout Oregon and Northern California, we conducted one of the largest carnivore surveys in the world for both martins and another weasel called Fisher, which there's an image that's blocked from you, but I think I can change that. That's an image of nope, okay. It's a large martin. It looks more like a corgi martin. Anyway, got lots of data, figured out where martins were. The United States Fish and Wildlife Service just signed the recovery plan yesterday. Wow. They are federally threatened as of 2020. There's lots more I could say about that. It's been quite a dramatic thing. But there's still a lot of information that we did not know. So we put the smallest GPS collars in the world. These things, we're trying to take a location of them every 5 minutes to try to learn many different things. So we've been trying to track to see their daily movements, what sort of vegetation they use, especially in forested areas and cut areas. And you'll notice that these animals stay north of a pretty busy haul road on the timber company. So sometimes roads are a definite barrier for all species, even if they're not used much by vehicles. But we also found them in the Oregon Dunes Recreation Area, which surprised the heck out of everybody because the Oregon Dunes Recreation Area was planted by the Forest Service 80, 90 years ago. So martins are typically associated with old growth conditions, but we're finding them in areas very young in Oregon and Northern California. They don't actually go to the beach, but this is the closest they get to the beach, honestly. And so that's really great, except for Highway 101. So Highway 101 and maybe some other factors are restricting them to only be next to the beach. They are not yet in the Siuslaw or at Washburn or in any of these other areas that we know. And it gets even worse. One of my PhD students, Maggie Hallerud, here at Oregon State, brilliant, innovated genomic methods to identify every individual from scat or poop. Love poop. But we found something horrible, and this is going to come out in press any day now. They are the most genetically inbred out of every carnivore in the world. Uh-oh. So cheetahs, very top, yeah, they're fine. Iberian lynx, okay. Black-footed ferrets, we make a big deal about black-footed ferrets in the United States, okay. And even our poor striped hyena is doing better genetically than these marten populations. So I fear in all of our lifetime, we might see some populations go extinct. Trying to fix that, can do it with more help. They're still there, but it's real tricky. My last fun section for you is insects, and this typically gives me more enlightenment, although there are huge insect declines. So how many of you drove a car 20 years ago and remembered so many insects on your windshield? So many. Yep. It is a known fact that when you drive now, you will have fewer, because we have huge declines everywhere. thanks to a thing called neonicotinoid pesticides. So those have really done a number on all our insects, and Corvallis is the epicenter of hope. So one thing that's really interesting is we have a silver spot butterfly. So the monarch butterfly is associated with milkweed. The silver spot butterflies are associated with lupins, I believe. And the Oregon Zoo even has their own reintroduction project. So you could take your grandchildren there, your friends, your family, and you could look at larvae of a butterfly. It's only about that big. If you go towards Rock Creek and the Siuslaw on the coast, you might see these weird nets, and those are for Oregon silver spot butterflies. There's also the Fender's blue butterfly, who is closely tied to Kincaid lupin, an endangered lupin. And the Institute for Applied Ecology in Corvallis is actually growing most of our Kincaid lupins of the state and doing reintroduction projects and helping in a variety of places all over. So you could watch videos on both Fender's blue and Oregon silver spot and be proud of where you're at or help these institutions out. Connie mentioned that I've been obsessed with bees for the last 6 years. It's really hard to do. There's over 700 species of bees in our state, and I didn't know 0 7 years ago, so I've had to study a lot. If you're interested in bees in your garden, these are all excellent books. Solitary Bees is more like a textbook, but this Common Bees of Western North America is a great guide for right here. It's really great. And so similarly, I've had crews that have been going out. This is one of those large 2020 fires. And we collect information and bees on all of the plants, collect a lot of data, and we've been trying to learn a lot about the bees of our state. Our data has gone into one of the world-leading bee programs. So some of you might know individuals that are associated with Melliflora or the Oregon Bee Project or the Oregon Bee Atlas, also based out of Corvallis. It's a really good voluntary program. If you like bees, then they would tell you to consider this license plate for your car. It's cute, but it goes directly to the Oregon Bee Atlas. And what you can do here, if you go to this particular site, you can click on any flower you want, you can click on any bee you want, you can click on any box you want or on any county, and you could learn which bees are associated with which flowers. And then you could plant them. And in fact, this is something we can all do, and Corvallis is really good at it, is providing bees and butterflies with some of the nutrients and fuel they need without spraying pesticides on them. And that will actually increase and boost our insect populations, at least the bees that we know of. So this is one positive thing we could talk about. Those sidewalks with the lawns gross. Plant flowers. You got this. Another exciting thing that you probably all know about, but if you don't, just last month, April 10th, our legislator passed the biggest wildlife act in the Oregon's history of history. So it's a transit tax that starts January 2027, and it's gonna charge like you $2 more per hotel room, and that's all gonna go to wildlife. So that is probably the most exciting thing for wildlife that's ever happened in the state. And all of that money, in theory, should go straight to the 2026 State Wildlife Action Plan. One of the things the State Wildlife Action Plan has is connectivity areas. So these take into account our whole road network, all of the species. A colleague of mine, Dr. Rachel Wheat, was the lead on this project. And Corvallis might have some challenges. So these are the areas that are priority. One of them goes straight through Highland. So trying to connect some of our wildlife species through urban areas is one of the concerns of our state. And these are opportunities for the state to focus on some of those areas, maybe for newt crossings. We'll see. The louder the voice to the state, the more likely things will happen. If you're interested in wildlife connectivity, then I've been thinking about license plates a lot. This particular plate goes to the Oregon Wildlife Foundation, and most of their research goes towards connectivity projects in the plate or in the state. I also mentioned the Oregon Bee plate. All of these, you see these fancy plates going around. This is a huge conservation boon. In the next year, there's going to be one featuring martins, I hope, and that'll really help our coastal martins. So maybe save your money for the martin plate. But if you need to take action today, all of these are good options, and this one would help connectivity the most. So the way license plates work is if you pay $40, $35 go to the organization of your choosing. You could also just donate to the organization of your choosing, but here you could bling out your car. So in summary for today, word of the day, flipper-boopery. You all got it. It's great. It comes from these two derivatives that I'm not going to read out loud, but it's been a century. Things are coming back. We could bring this word back, especially in Corvallis. Now you know the state has its first amphibian crossing, Highway 30 out of Portland. But you've also heard of turtle tragedy. So we're all aware that amphibians are not getting helped by any of our vehicles and any of our massive road systems. We thought about birds for a little bit. We thought about how that noise makes them need to sing louder and probably more horribly. Every time you sing at the top of your lungs, promise it's not as good as when you are just right on key, not screaming. And we do have challenges with roadkill and trash and things that we leave behind with species like ravens for our endangered sage-grouse and marbled murrelets. In Oregon, we can hit deer just as well as the rest of the white-tailed deer, but I really do recommend this book to take you on a journey to a lot of different countries. You can learn about the species of the day, which is the giant anteater. I'm just declaring it. Giant anteater is all of your species of the day, but marten can be too, because they are my favorite. And lastly, we talked about insects, both the windshield effect of doom and maybe some hope based out of Corvallis. And you might all be inspired to plant in your garden tomorrow when it's not so rainy and before the storm on Saturday. So with that, I could take questions. Yes.
Fascinating topic. This is kind of maybe more of a political question, but Governor Hochul of New York vetoed the state. It's a wildlife bill. It was a Wildlife Act bill that basically would provide crossings, wildlife crossings, primarily in the Adirondack State Park. And my question is, these issues get political and stuff, but I was really interested in this P22 project when you mentioned it, and I don't know if you have this kind of information or you know about this, but you said the community or they basically raise funds for that overcrossing. Was that like a public-private kind of venture? Was that who maintains it? What ownership is it, I guess? Who oversees that?
Yeah, so the question is largely about wildlife crossings, what to do to create them, the politics of people denying them, and what can we do to establish more. And I think to create them, somehow we have to come up with probably over $30 million, depending on the size and the scope. So the one in Southern California with P22, I mentioned that cost $87 million. And I like saying million weird because it just makes me feel like that's a lot of money. So if we could come up for strategic areas in which we could put crossings, then it will cost a lot of money. The reason why people don't do overcrossings for wildlife is largely because of politics that I am definitely not part of. Once they are built, they are typically part of the transportation system. So in Washington, the I-90 crossing is largely maintained by WashDOT, the Washington Department of Transportation. I'm assuming that's the same in Oregon. Most of these crossings shouldn't need maintenance. They're just giant things with hopefully native plants on them that animals could walk across. But they would be the same as bridges and roads. So in 2021, our government passed the Oregon Infrastructure Act, and there are clauses in that which would help the maintenance of our roads. So if you have a place for a crossing, raise lots of money.
So I also read Eager and enjoyed that a lot. What can you tell us about Ben Goldfarb?
Oh, yeah, I talked to Ben Goldfarb on the phone and also texted him quite a bit before this review, and then I watched his Science Friday interview and a more recent. He is a journalist, a conservation journalist based out of Colorado. He has written many articles for The Atlantic, High Country News, a variety of like smaller pieces. And a lot of those smaller pieces went into the development of books like Eager, which is about our native beavers, and this. I asked him a bit about why he picked these topics, and it seemed like there were a lot of reasons, and they all culminated to share something that was relatively underknown or underappreciated. He seems like a very nice man, and he sent me all of his photos that he took for his book. So many of those images you saw would say photo by Ben Goldfarb, like the giant anteater, and they were from his journey.
I don't remember having much in Oregon in Eager. I was disappointed with that.
Yeah, the question was about Eager in Oregon, and I think it's probably because he was Colorado-based, but Oregon does have at least 2 folks that I know well that work with beavers, and I think it's coming back to be something of a conservation dialogue. So beavers, of course, create larger wetlands. They might have areas to create higher fire resiliency, and they also allow for pools of water that might be more beneficial to various fishes. So beavers are a thing that I think in 2023, the state just changed them from a predator, which means shoot on sight, to an animal that's actually a fur bearer and conservation concern. So before we could just shoot them all, until very recently, which I thought was funny. Beavers, predators, dangerous. Question here, and then in the back.
How are the forest fires impacting the species diversity in the state?
Yeah, the question was about forest fires and impacting the diversity. Well, I must personally tell you, I worked and did most of my master's, PhD, postdocs in a place in Lassen, California, which burned at mostly high severity in 2021 and 2024. So most of the martins I met and fishers burned to fiery death. I became very depressed. And in studying those areas, I have found that if you look towards bees, bees love forest fires. So it depends on what genre of animal. The Holiday Farm Fire, which is just east of Eugene, we have a lot of activity, 3 PhD students and 1 master's student there. I would say that tree voles will never cross that, ever again. Like, I just don't think it's possible. And it might change and convert from forest to something else in our lifetime. So wildfire is maybe not as catastrophic as people may politically catastrophize to you, but they are not going to benefit most forest-dependent species at the severity and scale that they have been burning at. I fear 2026 will be a rough year. In the very back first, and then I'll get you.
Hey, I have a question, but I hope you don't mind a really short announcement. I'm part of an advocacy group called Streets Are for Everyone Corvallis, and we're trying to reduce car dependency, reduce motor vehicle traffic, and make things better for people walking, biking, and taking transit, and safer for everybody crossing, all the critters crossing the road. And you can find us at safecorvallis.org, and I have cards if anyone's interested. But my question is, those underpasses on Highway 97, is anyone studying those, and are they having an effect?
Yeah, great. So for the people online, we strongly encourage you, I have no affiliation with this,
Safecorvallis.org.
safecorvallis.org. You can go there, and also there's cards here if you want to get in your car and get a piece of paper. But it seems good to encourage higher pedestrian bike access and less death. Let's do that in Corvallis. Yep. And the question was about monitoring the overpasses and underpasses on Highway 97. And yes, they are monitored a little bit by remote cameras. I haven't seen a study come out, but science is really slow. It's about a 6-year process. So I think there's a webpage you can go to that I briefly looked at, and there were at least 12 species, including deer, that were using the underpasses via remote camera evidence. But the real challenge is the impact of an overpass or an underpass like Snoqualmie Pass, or the one that's going to come in Southern Oregon in 2028, is over a long time. So we're going to have momentary where they're just figuring it out, and with the turtles they created these called drift fences, so you steer all the turtles in the direction you need them to go. Same with these red-legged frogs. And that gives us immediate satisfaction, but I think as a state, a country, a world, we really need to look at like long-term genetic connectivity and what that provides animals if we want to be good stewards. Like, that's not everyone's goal. That might be your goal, but it's not everyone's goal. Okay, question in the gold, white.
Right. Just wanted to mention, I believe there's a underpass for 20. In the latest straightened section that they put in an underpass, and I've heard that it's been pretty successful. The only problem they had, and this is just hearsay, what somebody told me, is that they had a little trouble with hunters going down to shoot, the animal, deer, I guess, or whatever, when they were coming.
So the summary might be that there was an underpass on Highway 20 going.
Well,
there is.
When they straightened it again.
When they straightened it again, yes. There was an underpass, but there may have been trouble with people hunting deer. So yes, there's also some challenges with wildlife undercrossing for deer and elk. That's something. Any more questions, comments, concerns? Great. So I would encourage you to talk to the individual in the back who has a bit more on Safe Corvallis, and also feel free to talk to me or others.